Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Huang. Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, recently visited China and met with its leader Xi Jinping. With the recent TikTok ban, criticism over China's overcapacity, Chinese aggression in the South China Sea, tensions between the two countries continue to rise. We'll look at what this visit means for the U.S. and China, and also for Taiwan as the country's new president will take office on May 20th. Joining us today are Lai I-chung, Prospect Foundation President, Alexander Huang, Kuomintang International Affairs Director, Council on Strategic Wargaming Studies Chair. A warm welcome to both on the show. Blinken arrived in Shanghai on April 24th for his second visit to China in less than a year. He focused on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, peace across the Taiwan Strait, and disputes in the South China Sea. Let's take a look at the conversations he had with Xi in Beijing.
中方乐见一个自信、开放、繁荣发展的美国，希望美方面积极正面看待中国的发展。这个根本问题解决了，第一颗纽扣好了，中美关系才会真正稳下来、好起来，向前走。
We are committed to maintaining and strengthening the lines of communication between us, to advance that agenda, and again, to deal responsibly with our differences so that we avoid any miscommunications, any misperceptions, any miscalculations.
Alexander, we've also seen other visits from prominent U.S. officials, as we've seen earlier in mid-April. Janet Yellen was in China. Do you feel this has diffused some of the tensions?
I think it is agreed by both leaders in San Francisco last year that the both government will resume or reopen dialogues on the issues of mutual concern. So I think Antony Blinken's visit is a significant part of the series of visit. There will be a lot of governmental channels to be opened. There will be more dialogue. I think the basic understanding is that both Beijing and Washington wanted to have a reduced tension and also resume dialogue at least before the United States presidential election.
And you see that happening with more coming.
Yes.
And that was also a key point with President Xi.
Because Tony Blinken had reached several understanding and agreement that there will be more dialogue on tourism, personnel exchange, and other discussions.
Speaking of security, Blinken also confronted Beijing over its support for Russia in providing components that are powering its attacks on Ukraine. President, could we see a change to the no-limits relationship between China and Russia, given that the U.S. is coming in terms of diffusing tensions, or that China wants to diffuse tensions with the U.S., given how direct this message is?
I do not think that's going to happen because Russia and China apparently raised its relationship with Russia more fundamental about its relationship with the United States. Because Russia is not only Chinese and most important allies, but also when China deal with the country, including the United States, for the possible tension or the confrontations, the Russia's backing is the most important vehicle that China can rely on. So that I do not think that China will, just because of the Tony Blinken asked them to do, will reduce its support for Russia. But China definitely would not cross the so-called certain limit in terms of not exporting the direct military equipment to Russia for the Russia's attack against Ukraine. But as we see from the Ukrainian, when they captured the Russians' armory in Ukraine, they found out a lot of the China-made materials or the components in those captures Russians' military weaponries or even the shells. And we do see that in terms of the China-Russia bilateral trade, a significant number of the elements that will be put to produce the powders that has been increasing like a fifth or tenfold. And so that means a significant resources by China has been flowing into Russia for the alleged weaponry or the war effort by Russia.
And will continue to increase.
I believe that it will.
Alexander, I wanted to draw to you, since you're an expert in both war games and also in Chinese defense. How do you see China's support for Russia, given there's been global condemnation, and it seems like there's a lot of sympathy for Ukraine here?
Several things. I think Beijing has been relatively sensitive for not shipping or exporting to Russia directly with ammunitions and weapon systems, but maybe through other ways like Iran or North Korea. But this time, Tony Blinken's argument was that the machine tools and the materials, raw materials, that can used by Russians to produce, lethal weapons. This is the area that they are discussed at this moment. I think this is not only a trilateral relationship between Russia, the United States, and China. It's also related directly to the situation in Ukraine, because the United States just passed a package to support Israel, Ukraine, and also Taiwan. On the other hand, the United States also doesn't want to see that China continue direct or indirectly support the Russians' efforts in the military front. So I believe that this is the core issue. It's more related to the tug of war between the West support of Ukraine and Chinese support of Russia, rather than the trilateral partnership or alliance.
So you believe there will be some kind of pushback?
Yeah, it would be. I think
from the Chinese side.
At least, Secretary Blinken had openly stated, and I think it will have some impact, but it will not stop China anyway.
It's great you mentioned Taiwan, since the country's new president, Lai I-chung, will be sworn in on May 20th. Despite that we've seen a low-key approach from the State Department, Blinken's China trip is just less than a month before that. I wanted to draw to President Lai. Do you feel that this is deliberate, the U.S. approach in terms of not mentioning Taiwan, but making a trip before the inauguration?
Well, I would say that, first of all, this Blinken trip to China, at least from some sources we heard, is that he is under the invitation of Wang Yi, rather than he asked for this trip by himself. So that if Blinken is taking a serious look at the cross-strait relationship and wanted to address that situation through this trip, this does not seems to me it's a deliberate action by himself, but basically it's more opportunistic that he took this opportunity to address this issue. But of course, the Chinese action since the electoral victory of the William Lai since January hasn't really been useful in lowering the tension. But of course, China did not raise the attention to the level of the direct military confrontation either. And so the Tony Blinken, his trip this time in addressing this issue is part of the wider effort of the United States to continue to lower the temperature across the Taiwan Straits, and especially before the May 20th. And also this could be an indication that the United States is very confident about what William Lai is about to say, so that they believe that there's no reason for China to react to what the William Lai's inauguration speech will do.
Alexander, what do you think? Do you feel that that's what the U.S. is trying to attempting? And just outside of Taiwan, there's also the Philippines, where there's rising tensions in waters in the South China Sea and those disputed waters, which the Philippines calls the West Philippine Sea. Do you feel that is also something that was on Blinken's agenda, apart from just Taiwan?
Yes, as you know, I do war games for more than 20 years. I think the United States had already had this William Lai victory scenario that been played out by themselves. So the United States position and how to deal with a William Lai victory is already in their mind for quite some time. I don't think it's the focal point of Blinken's trip this time, and I don't think that they have not yet have any understanding on the situation leading to the May 20th inaugural speech. So I think this is, as we said, the economy, the technology sanction are the more urgent issue. I think both sides doesn't want Taiwan to be the number one urgency in the bilateral relationship. And even some more people saying that the tensions in the South China Sea that related to the Philippines are more serious at this moment than the cross-strait relations. Earlier this month, we have, the Filipino president travel to Washington, D.C., and having the trilateral dialogue with the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and the President Biden. So I think South China Sea and the role and functions of the Philippines in the immediate future will also be a focal point in addition to the Taiwan Strait.
Do you feel that China's taking more of a wait-and-see approach with William Lai, or do you feel that they're focused on more issues such as what President Lai mentioned in terms of the economy and other overwhelming issues of China now?
I think from Beijing's point of view, the judgment day is not right now, and not even May 20th. It's going to be the United States election on November 5. So the concluding paragraph of policy assessment will not be drawn until then.
Until January of next year?
Yes.
What do you think?
I do not think that it will be that imminent. This November election, whoever wins the election in the United States, that will make the Chinese an assessment toward the Taiwan Strait will make them to do the readjustment to the degree that it will fundamentally change every calculation they have earlier. But I would say that China definitely is so much worried about the economic development and situation within China, and China desperately wants the United States to re-engage with China. And right now, China is blaming the U.S. for all the economic problems China has, and try to woo all the U.S. investors back to China. But apparently, that the efforts and the result is not satisfactory in Xi Jinping's view.
For their domestic audience, or do you feel it's actually a strategy of the Chinese state in dealing with the U.S.?
I do not think that is more about the domestic audience, because if it is a domestic audience, Xi Jinping will be very much tougher on the U.S. and blaming U.S. for all the woes. But apparently Xi Jinping this time is asking the United States, do not treat us as an enemy, continue to engage with China so that the both sides, our relationship can go forward. To a certain extent, Xi Jinping is also almost like begging for the U.S. to come back. And the Tony Blinken, especially this time, that we heard that he is asked by Wang Yi, invited by Wang Yi to China, and also have the access directly with the Xi Jinping. Apparently, that Xi Jinping is using this access that Tony Blinken can have to tell him about the economic worries that China has, and want the United States to help them to get out.
During Blinken's visit, the U.S. passed a bill totaling $95 billion in military aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. In response, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen thanked the U.S. Congress for its support for Taiwan's defense. However, we've seen China's Taiwan Affairs Office and its Foreign Minister Wang Yi blast that support, telling Blinken directly that the U.S. must stop arming Taiwan. President Lai, do you feel this is what you expected to come out of the PRC government?
Yeah, definitely, especially from Wang Yi. And if you see that the U.S.-China engagement in the last several years, it seems like the Wang Yi always played the so-called the hawkish cat, the one that will give all the very heavy words and put down the position very seriously and warning the United States. And usually in the past, like the previous Foreign Minister Qin Gang, will be more conciliatory. And Xi Jinping himself, when he received the incoming U.S. visitors, he would just gave the overall guideline and not showing much of the emotions. But Wang Yi is the one that usually come out with very hard words against the United States. So I think there's definitely a kind of role playing and the division of the roles that when they received the U.S. Visitors, they wanted to put out. And of course, Wang Yi also used that opportunity just to lay down the Chinese foreign policy positions toward the United States.
A bit of like the wolf warrior that we've seen.
I think that's whether that's by design or because of that's who he is. This is what we have right now.
Alexander, going back to military aid, since you're a military expert, how do you feel this in terms of significance in showing U.S. will to support Taiwan militarily, or in terms of substantially helping Taiwan?
Well, the United States had, in the past several years, it's not new that the United States had openly supported Taiwan's continual modernization and combat readiness. There are numerous reports that are available online, and people can look at it. So I think the United States' intention is very clear that they will do whatever they can within a legal framework that helping Taiwan can better defend itself. So I'm not terribly worried about the complaints or démarche from Beijing over arms package or arms sales, because they have done that for decades.
So it's this typical verbiage.
Yeah,
that
they
you see
will
out of
do that
Beijing.
anyway. Yeah.
Speaking of the many President Laiism, the President-elect Lai I-chung also mentioned that this aid will, quote, help ensure peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and boost confidence in the region. President Lai, what is Lai referring to in terms of boosting confidence in the region?
Well, I think that first of all, it's definitely Taiwan will do everything it could to maintain the stability across the Taiwan Strait. So, in order to prevent and to avoid war happens here, and also the issue about the Taiwan Straits, and President Lai knows that this is a concern not just about the Taiwan-China, but also this region as well as the whole world. So he has he's aware of the responsibility he has for the world peace that he needs to shoulder. At the same time, I think in one of the meeting, he also expressed the willingness for a party-to-party dialogue. I will say that this is a very significant departure from the past DPP positions, because in the past DPP always stressed out the cross-strait dialogue had to be conducted through the governmental channels. But now from William Lai himself talks about the possible DPP and the CCP dialogue. That is a significant deviation from what the DPP has in the past, by also go to the party-to-party channels, and how that will result. To a certain extent, I think, does that mean that William Lai is okaying the KMT-CCP dialogue? I do not know whether that's the implication goes. But when William Lai talks about the possibility of having a DPP-CCP dialogue, I think people need to really take a very serious look at how this deviation from the past DPP position, especially from a traditional DPP loyalist like William Lai, coming from his mouth.
Interesting times indeed. Alexander, I wanted to go back to, in terms of, you mentioned that the U.S. and China don't want Taiwan to become a focal point of the relations at this point, and they want to focus on economics. But recently, we've seen a ban from the U.S. Congress, and President Biden signed into law the divestiture of TikTok. How significant is this for China?
Well, for profit or revenue, I don't think that's really the focal point. That is the atmosphere, the attitude, or a policy that given people a sense of sentiment, the sentiment, political sentiment about the bilateral relationship. I think we should understand that the tensions and the conflicting points, disagreements between Washington and Beijing are there. They won't go away for a long time. So I think passing the law or ban TikTok is just part of that. They will continue because I think great powers understand that sometimes you fight, sometimes you talk, or tan, da. That's the power game that the great powers that they need to play. They have no choice. They cannot always fight, and sometimes they need to talk. So I believe the basic interests that the United States is concerned the most, for instance, influence campaign, cognitive warfare, whether TikTok will have access to the personal data or something, or compromise American, intels. Those are the key elements. It's not just a commercial revenue issue.
It's great you mentioned that because, as you mentioned, that China's actually looking at the next U.S. presidential election.
Right.
And Antony Blinken, in an interview with CNN, mentioned that the U.S. is concerned about election interference from China, as we've seen in 2016 from Russia. How severe is this? Do you feel that this could actually tweak the results of the election?
Well, personally, I don't think that it depends on the contents. If all the contents are Chinese image or U.S.-China relationship, that's one thing. If they get involved, those cognitive warfare, the contents getting involved in domestic American issues, for instance, labor, for instance,
Fentanyl.
fentanyl, or the campus safety or other issues.
With the protests with
then
Hamas.
that would be very, very contagious. So there are a wider area. It's not limited to bilateral relationship. So I think as science and technology continue to evolve, more and more that democracies or democratic institutions that we need to be more vigilant about the impact of new tech on our democratic process.
What about you, President Lai? Do you feel that the U.S. is very concerned about this? How do you see China influence? As I am aware you're involved in a lot of the efforts within Taiwan as well, because Taiwan in many aspects is seen as the ground zero for Chinese disinformation campaigns.
I believe when Tony Blinken, in his visit to China, he said the U.S. sees some evidence of the Chinese election interferences. Then I think that we do not know what kind of evidence he has and make the conclusion that China is involved, but definitely he sees something that's indicating enough. He believed that China is behind the scene in manipulating those issues and trying to interfering and leading the U.S. domestic opinions. I think the issue probably will be more than just TikTok or how some of the elements of the news within TikTok that spread in the United States that has that strongly biased toward a certain element. Although we do not know what exactly Tony Blinken has in his hand, but from our observation about TikTok, at least in terms of its reports and the content related with Israel and Hamas war, there's the study by the AI Lab found out that in the TikTok, the news or the content favoring the Palestinian Hamas stories, then it's like to the Israelis about like a 60-1. That is more than the usual distribution of the opinions. And in those 60-1, none of them talks about the Hamas, the terrorist attack against Israel that caused the Israel the offense in the Gaza. And so that with what we observe already about that very uneven distributions in terms of the opinions and the apparent biasing toward anti-Israelis narrative, there could be the evidence about what the TikTok is favoring in changing the opinion spectrums and related with the United States. And we do know that the Israeli and Hamas, the so-called social media coverage already caused the Democratic Party their support in the United States. And that could tip the balance in terms of elections. So I do not know whether that's something that the Tony Blinken has in his hand, or he has something more direct. But the TikTok apparently is something that is not a very neutral social media platform.
So before we end this, just quickly for both of you, who do you feel is China's preferred candidate in the U.S., given that China doesn't have a vote, but it does want to influence the elections?
Well, in general terms, that I think among great powers, they want the situation predictable. So uncertainties, unpredictability are the poison for their decision making. I would say that's the key.
What about you, President Lai?
Yeah, no disagreement. I think the probably Biden brings brings a certainty, but the hardline approach definitely will be toward China. And Trump brings the huge amount of uncertainty, but probably also will be able to weaken some of the alliances that Biden administration built up in the last 4 years. So I do not know who will be Chinese favorites.
Thank you both for your insights and interesting times indeed. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for Taiwan Plus.
Taiwan Plus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.